it could be that we are seeing, as you pointed out, the end of LeBron James as the best player in the world.
Whenever you add a big, especially in today's NBA, and that is still what Anthony Davis is a big, you have to learn to play with him. I just don't feel the same way about Kawhi and the Clippers.
He asked 20 executives around the league about the biggest questions facing the NBA. And there's a ton to dig into, but most notably, none of them picked the Lakers to win the title. Not one.
LeBron's not going to win the championship. The only question for LeBron is when he doesn't win it, how much does he blow up this organization and get a real star player alongside he and Anthony Davis?
This is a blow to the Lakers. And I think that they will not, N-O-T, have a shot at a championship without Boogie.
Not have a shot at the title?
Yes.
Because a role player got hurt. Okay,
Absolutely.
Greg Jennings, you're up.
Are you convinced LeBron will win his 4th ring this season?
Hell no. And if last night was any indication of this championship mindset, this is not going to be a championship year for the Lakers. Look, I know it was a scrimmage, but they don't have enough.
You have named the top 5 players in the NBA going into next season, and LeBron James is not on the list?
We don't have a 6-person list.
LeBron is old. He's not nearly as interested in basketball as he used to be. He's making movies and TV shows and worried about Nike's relationship with China. Bronsexuals. Last night showed you your lover isn't into you. The Lakers will make the playoffs, but they're no threat to win the West. They're no threat to the Clippers.
Just under, as has his teammate Danny.
The Los Angeles Lakers are the NBA's 2019-20 champions.
Last week, the Los Angeles Lakers won their 17th championship in franchise history, which was not only a monumental milestone for the organization, but also this championship was very important for several players on the roster. Since then, I've thought of several different video ideas, but unfortunately none of them really capture the essence of this year for this organization and these players until I took the time out and re-listened to LeBron's speech when he was receiving his championship and finals MVP.
We just want our respect. Rob wants his respect. Coach Vogel wants his respect. Our organization wants their respect. Laker Nation wants their respect. And I want my damn respect too.
Respect. A word that holds weight to anyone who has dedicated a portion of their life to perfecting themselves at a craft that has the potential to make them iconic, famous, and even immortal in many cases. And looking back at some of the years leading up into this championship run, I have to agree with LeBron. The respect that has been placed on the Lakers as an organization, some of the role players on this team, Anthony Davis, and of course the man himself, LeBron, has been very little. And for many people, this lack of respect was justifiable. When you look back at the decisions that have been made with not only these players, but also the franchise over the past several years, it did leave them open to be heavily criticized. However, here we are now, and I do believe it's very interesting how often the goalpost is being moved for everyone involved with this championship team, which is extremely dangerous because sports is one of the very few entities where an individual can dedicate their time, their passion, and their energy into a craft, and yet their legacy can still be put into question and possibly wrongfully depicted by someone on TV who possibly has no idea what it truly takes to get to that level of excellence. And going back and giving a proper depiction of how we got here for the Lakers is honestly the best way to give the proper respects for this team. So first, let's talk about the front office, because for whatever reason, there are some people out there who don't want to give the proper credit to this organization for piecing together a championship caliber roster. So much so that I've heard some people claim that the Lakers have quote unquote cheated or rigged the system.
All right, on to the video. And Laker fans, you will be upset at what I'm about to say, but you need to accept it. Here's how they cheated the league: by being the Lakers.
Which is odd to me because these are the same people who didn't even pick the Lakers to win the championship this year.
I think beyond LeBron and AD, the Lakers are average. Their depth will get crushed by the Clippers. I think Kawhi's team makes easy work of the Lakers. It's Clippers in 5.
Now, let me be clear, I am completely aware of the advantages that come with playing in a market such as LA. The Lakers have an advantage of not only location, but also have an advantage on the financial end since they have the ability to spend a lot of money to piece together a championship caliber team. However, It's just not that simple. If it was that simple, then there would be plenty of players lining up to play for the Knicks. However, as we clearly know, not only have the Knicks swung and missed out on many free agents over the past 2 decades, but the organization is so dysfunctional that Kristaps Porzingis demanded a trade in the middle of his rookie contracts. Also, you can look at the Chicago Bulls. If it was as simple as being in a large market, then the Bulls would have a little bit more than just 1 or 2 relevant seasons after the Michael Jordan era. Or you can even look at the Sixers, who still decided to tank despite the fact that they're in Philadelphia so they can acquire some franchise players. And even the Lakers are a great example. For the better part of the last 10 years, the Lakers have not only swung and missed out on several free agents, but also some key players on the roster have decided to depart and leave the organization for other teams, such as Pau Gasol and Dwight Howard. And speaking of what happened over the past 7 to 8 years, I do believe there is a lot of misunderstanding of who exactly has been running the Lakers. Right now, it is Jeanie Buss on the ownership side and Rob Pelinka as a general manager who are calling the shots. And those 2 individuals have been in control for the last 2 to 3 years. So when people make arguments about what happened with Dwight Howard, Pau Gasol, Timothy Mozgov, and missing out on certain free agents such as LaMarcus Aldridge and Carmelo Anthony, it needs to be understood that that had nothing to do with Jeanie Buss and Rob Pelinka. And even though, yes, there were some rough patches in the first year or 2 with Rob Pelinka and Jeanie Buss, where we are right now is a massive improvement from where the Lakers have been for the better part of the last 8 years. Furthermore, just having LeBron on the team obviously just isn't enough, which is why Rob Pelinka had to pull the trigger on Anthony Davis in that trade. And even though, yes, some people would say that's a no-brainer, there were still people, for whatever reason, still criticizing that transaction and claiming that the Lakers gave up too much.
So if we're just doing who won the trade, first take style, I think the Pelicans won the trade about as convincingly as I've ever seen a team win a superstar trade. The haul that they got back resembles nothing in the history of the league.
Which is interesting because I vividly remember how critical people were on Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball, especially Lonzo.
But unfortunately, everybody we're being offered right now, there's not a single guy who has a chance to be an all-star. You posted on Twitter today, Tatum versus Ingram. I don't think that's a contest. I think Tatum's ceiling, even the way he's playing now, he's just better than Ingram. I'm not even really positive what Ingram is.
You have to make sure that the one piece that you're getting back amidst all the names is really important. And if the one name, if the best is Brandon Ingram or Kuzma, if you're the Pelicans, forget all the challenges of what's going on with that franchise. If you're sitting there going, why am I supposed to do this now? Like, I don't think the number one piece at the top of this pile of assets is that attractive.
And then finally, hiring Frank Vogel as a head coach, even with Jason Kidd as an assistant, seemed to be a great decision for this team, especially since Vogel is a defensive-oriented coach, and this is a team that potentially was going to have some problems on that side of the ball. So even with the advantages of being in LA, the Lakers still had various other decisions to make sure this team was not only going to be competent, but also could compete for a championship. Now, if you disagree with me, I completely understand, but all I ask is for consistency. Because if you're not going to give the Lakers their proper credit, then why exactly are we praising the Clippers? The Clippers are another example that proves that just because you are in a great location, that does not mean that you're going to be able to acquire free agents and piece together competent rosters. The Clippers struggled significantly for practically all of its existence, largely because of who was owning the team. Also, for several years leading up into this season, the Clippers have proven just because you have 2 top-tier players on your roster, that does not mean you will reach expectations, since with both Blake Griffin and Chris Paul, the Clippers were unable to even make the conference finals. And even when it comes to coaching, it took 7 years, only 3 playoff series wins, and 2 3-1 leads that were blown before people were finally critical of Doc Rivers and the Clippers fired him. But even if we're just referring to the players on the roster, this year the Clippers acquired Kawhi in free agency, similar to LeBron James. They also went after a co-star in Paul George and traded a lot of assets in the process, similar to what the Lakers did with Anthony Davis. And actually, if you go back and you look at what the Clippers also gave up to receive Markieff Morris in the middle of the season, easily argue that the Clippers gave up just as much, if not more, to receive Paul George and Markieff Morris than the Lakers gave up for Anthony Davis, yet no one complained about it at all. So the Clippers are in LA, used that location to their advantage, gave up a lot of assets for a co-star, yet for whatever reason, we praised their general manager, so much so that Lawrence Frank won Executive of the Year, while people try to discredit Rob Pelinka, and he didn't even finish top 5 in that race. To me, that just doesn't make any sense.
Skilled big men playing with LeBron that didn't have tremendous success as a number one elsewhere before. Chris Bosh, Kevin Love, then he plays with LeBron, now AD. Did any of those guys before AD play better with LeBron or worse? Here we go again, y'all.
It's LeBron, AD, and a bunch of, I think Joy said this, specialists. There's a lot of specialists. Specialists work for Russell Wilson in Russell's prime because he's filthy good. LeBron's not in his prime. LeBron's in his 17th year.
This is why I'm not sure LeBron is into the business of winning anymore. LeBron James really wanted to be in LA, period, no matter what.
And then we have LeBron. Since LeBron has transitioned to LA, it has been very interesting to see how many people talk about him in the NBA community. And even though some of the criticism has been valid, quite honestly, most of it has not only been comical, but also contradicts itself. For example, the same people who are making claims that LeBron came to Los Angeles simply because he wanted to participate in Hollywood, movies, and endorsements, and he no longer cared about winning basketball games.
LeBron James, Los Angeles, is out of the championship business. LeBron James came here for Hollywood.
Were the same ones who claimed that just 6 months later, LeBron was so concerned about winning that he was willing to ruin team chemistry, trade away half of the roster to bring in Anthony Davis.
He derailed the team with the ADs that he needed to have AD and have his agent Rich Paul put this out publicly with 1.5 years left on AD's contract.
So yeah, that just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. As soon as LeBron touched down, people were acting as if like he owed the Lakers fans anything of significance, despite the fact that the Lakers at that time were one of the worst ran franchises in the NBA in the 5 years prior to him making that decision. People were claiming that on the defensive end of the floor, LeBron was going to be carried and he just didn't have that much effort on that side of the floor. And even went as far as claiming that LeBron was going to have problems with Frank Vogel because that wasn't his quote unquote choice. And now here we are at the end of the year and people are just moving the goalposts. The same team that many people did not choose to win a championship before the postseason began, now all of a sudden, this championship that LeBron won has an asterisk next to it due to circumstances that were out of his control. Now, I'm not saying that LeBron is perfect and that some of these criticisms aren't valid, but if you're going to make an argument and use those reasonings to why LeBron isn't the best player in the NBA, or again, even just slight LeBron in whatever he does, then at bare minimum, be consistent on where you stand. Because the same people who are making those arguments were the same people who were praising Kawhi just a year ago, even though a lot of those things that people were critical on LeBron on, if you held Kawhi to the same standard, you would have to be critical on him as well. How is it that you can criticize LeBron for quote unquote coming to LA just for Hollywood, movies, and endorsements, but don't criticize Kawhi for the same thing? Because Kawhi not only left a team that just won a championship to go to LA, but as soon as he made his way to Los Angeles, a player that was never known to be outspoken, as soon as he came to LA, he immediately made a New Balance commercial. If you're going to be upset at LeBron for quote unquote forcing the Lakers to trade everyone to go get Anthony Davis, then why aren't you upset at Kawhi, who clearly forced the Clippers to trade a whole bunch of assets to get Paul George? The skeptics out there who were concerned about LeBron's groin problem had very little to say about Kawhi potentially load managing yet again in the middle of his prime. And oddly enough, even though last year LeBron definitely on the defensive end had some questionable moments, this year defensively he improved significantly. While on the other hand, it seems as if no one wants to address the fact that Kawhi Leonard struggled significantly when it comes to ball handling and playmaking for other players. So much so that he allegedly is making even more demands to the front office to get a playmaker on the roster to play alongside him. As if like the Clippers team already isn't deep enough as it is. And if you honestly believe that this year's finals run for LeBron and the Lakers should have an asterisk next to it, then the same should be said about the Toronto Raptors and Kawhi Leonard, who won a championship against the Golden State Warriors team that not only missed Kevin Durant, but also Klay Thompson in pivotal moments of that series. Now, the purpose of this video isn't to point out and expose all the people who were wrong, because everyone is wrong. Everyone has their moments. I'm a Laker fan, and I didn't even pick the Lakers to win the championship this year. The problem that I have are the reasonings and moving the goalposts once we understand the conclusion. If you're going to be hypercritical of LeBron James, Anthony Davis, the front office, the role players on the Lakers, then you have to be hypercritical of everyone else. Because when you don't, not only is it inconsistent, not only are you clearly biased, and not only does it come across as you being a hater, but just like LeBron said, it's very obvious that you do not want to give respect where respect is due.